Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. Before we get started, do please take a moment to subscribe and leave us a comment or a review, which helps the algorithms know that we're doing a good job and that you like what we're doing. For those of you that don't know who we are the Scream Teams, that is the review teams for thescarefactor.com. We're a haunted house review site. Our goal is to bring you as much entertainment and value and information as we can that pertains to Halloween, haunted houses, and the haunted attraction industry. I am Tyler, and I'm here with my wife, Nora. We are Team Zombillies for the Scare Factor, and here this week we've got Brian from Team Skelegore and Tiffany from Team Terror Techies. They are from New York and Washington, respectively. And the topic for discussion this week is timed ticketing and virtual queues, the whole pick a number system, that kind of thing. Is it worth the time for haunts to go through and implement all of these new things? And is it worth it to customers to go through a couple of extra hoops to get that shorter wait experience? How is it all working out? Largely based on what we experienced last year. So yeah, that's what's going on. Any thoughts, Brian?
Yeah. Time ticketing. It's actually before we really jump into this, I wanted to make a point about some housekeeping notes. As our eagle-eared listeners might have figured out, it is not currently Saturday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern.
I bet
And
they did pick up on that.
but there might be a few out there like, wait a minute, something's not right here. You never know, right? It's worth pointing out. So we are a little bit behind this week, and so part of that is just mishap in scheduling,
Well, and
and just we kind of dropped the ball a little bit.
and it's not
Sorry.
totally off the table that we might just move to Sundays. So if you're listening to this or you're watching it at a later date, comment below and let us know if you kind of prefer Sundays for these live streams. If that's easier for you to tune in, then we will definitely consider moving it to Sunday. So yeah, that's a thing. So with
Yeah.
time,
The other thing too was it's funny that you mentioned that because the other housekeeping note I wanted to mention was this week we are doing a full scale testing on recording audio for a better audio, I guess,
experience.
quality. Yeah, experience. That's probably a better word for it. And so we are looking at having our own audio recorded for so when we release the audio portion of the podcast, we have a much better experience for our listeners. And so at some point we may be moving away from these live streams. But that's yet to be seen. We don't know what exactly is going to come of that, and that's going to be something that we'll just have to discuss as time goes on. But it is kind of funny that you point out, like, oh, well, the people like Sundays better. So we may be releasing a video-esque format on YouTube.
What he's trying to say
So
is
we
that
could
we're upping
actually
our
keep
game.
that on a schedule. Yes, we're getting better at this. And also, as our eagle-eared listeners may have figured out, I am not using the same microphone that I typically use. I'm using an external USB microphone this week.
It does
There's that
sound a little
too.
bit
And
roomier and nicer, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, a
I
little
think we're
built-in
all using
reverb.
something different,
Yeah,
actually.
and also I got a haircut. Not that
Oh,
any of you
I
could
can
ever see
actually
it, but
tell that through the microphone that you got a haircut.
right, yeah. I'm losing some of the sound dampening qualities that my long shaggy hair once had. So.
yeah.
All right. So, to kick off,
back on topic here.
Yeah. So let's define what some of these things are first, and I think there is a distinct difference between time ticketing and virtual queues, and even the like the pick a number system. I think those are probably the big three topics, or not really topics, but categories that you might be able to subdivide these into. And the time ticketing, I think, mostly refers to when there is actually a separate time slot that you're scheduled to arrive at the haunt. And then a virtual queue is a means of shortening your wait time once you're actually there. And of course, pick a number. As you show up, you get a number, and then you go in when your group number is called. which can be closely intertwined with the virtual queue, but I think the pick a number system is more primitive and traditional, physical stuff, whereas a virtual queue would be like a text message on your phone or something like that, a little more electronic slash virtual.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And on that note, I have experienced a number of these different, I guess, methods or techniques. Earlier this week, talking with Nora, she mentioned that you guys had experienced one or two of these. I'm sure Tiffany, you guys have experienced something similar, have done something similar. Um, I think some of them really do actually work quite well. This whole take a number system seems, to me at least, to be one of the better ones, right? Because if you're going to have this time slot that you only want certain number of people in your haunt at a given time, or in the attraction, I should say, at a given time, then that seems to be the best way to go. It seems to me anyway, because you have the most control over how many people you're going to let in,
Definitely
right?
helps with crowd control, and then it certainly had its benefits last year where folks were trying to, like you say, minimize the number of people in one place at one time. So
Right. Now I have also bought tickets to haunts that there's these time slots. It says, oh well, Friday at 8:30. There's five remaining, and I go, okay, well, I'm gonna pick up two of them, and then I do that, and I get there, and there's like 80,000 people standing in line. I'm like, what was the point?
right,
Because I got here expecting there to be I don't know, maybe 100 people, and there's so many more people standing in line because the haunt sold these tickets for these time slots, but then they dropped the ball on the second half of that, where they were supposed to then enforce the time slot,
yeah,
which they're not. And I get it. You bought this ticket. Now you want to show up. You want to see the show. Maybe you were running late. Traffic sucked. You got in an accident. Whatever it was. But I mean, if you as a haunt, if you're going to sell these tickets for certain time slots, why bother time slots if you're not going to enforce the time slot then?
right, yeah. You shouldn't
Right?
shouldn't
Why
be
why not just sell tickets for that date?
right. And I know it's really hard for a haunt to turn somebody away once they're there, but maybe to fully implement this type of system, there almost needs to be like two different places where that waiting can be done. So, like a general midway area, one of the best places that we found using this, well, and they actually weren't even using it, but they could, I guess. Um, well, I was going to talk about Land of Illusion because they've got a whole big midway area where you can go watch the stage, or you can go to the Voodoo Lounge and get you a couple drinks and some food, something like that, something to do while you're waiting to enter the attractions. And well, I guess Haunted Hills Hospital was another one that actually did use the virtual queue. You were slated to arrive. Uh, well, refresh my memory, Nora. Did they have actually slated time when you were supposed to arrive, or did you just get entered
No,
into a
we
virtual queue when you got there?
yeah, they entered us into a virtual queue, and then they took one of our cell phone numbers. And as we went around and like got some food and stuff like that, they were telling us, like, they messaged us and said you have 40 minutes, and then they said you have 20, and then they said please report to the front. And then that's when we actually went to get in line for our spot, which after that was a bit confusing, but it allowed us the 40 minutes to wander around and spend some money and have some fun and not have to stand in that, you know, static line the whole time.
And that's the benefit for the haunts, is that they can, they don't have to turn people away as long as they have something like that available. Fear Fair is another one that had the virtual queue, and he had a little midway area set up as well. And but I think he also didn't he do the actual time ticketing also, because they're no, he didn't.
Nope. Yeah, he did it the same way that Haunted Hills Hospital did.
Gotcha. Okay, so like if you're having problems where Haunted Hills Hospital probably could have used this because they were absolutely packed on the night that we were there. The whole entire midway was full of people. So that was would have been a really good opportunity to implement both the time ticketing with the virtual queue, because that could have helped minimize some of that congregation that was going on in the Midway area, or at least the thought of it would be, uh, help people refrain from showing up so early. But when you use the time ticketing, or when you use the virtual queue without the time ticketing, you're causing a lot of people to still have to try to get there as close to opening time as possible, because at least in their minds they're wanting to get there as soon as possible so they can get that spot in line in that virtual queue, and have, you know, peace, I guess, knowing that nobody's going to get in front of that spot. Um, so yeah, time ticketing, like I was saying, can help with uh, crowd control as far as the size of the crowd, um, whereas the virtual queue helps minimize the line wait. And so yeah.
Well, they can
It
both
does.
minimize line weight, but one of them is, I don't know. I feel like being able to roam the queue and midway areas, even if I am there for 2 hours, I still enjoy that as long as it's set up well. Versus, oh, I'm supposed to be there at 7 o'clock. I get there at 7 o'clock and I go get right in line and I have less than a 30-minute wait, and in the door I am, and I missed everything else because I went and got in line.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, last year I went to a haunt here that is put on by a dance school, CNC Dance Company, and they did a take a number, time ticketing, virtual queue, uh, I guess, method that, and it works so well for them. Right? You showed up and you couldn't buy tickets online. At least I don't think you could. You showed up and you bought your tickets there, and then you stood in some line, which I think this line had to do with one COVID. They're taking temperatures, they're asking you all these questions. Have you been out of the state of New York in the last 2 weeks? So you got any symptoms of COVID? Have you got a new or worsening cough? You're short of breath. There's all this other crap, and so that took time. And then also what they were doing was they were seating people restaurant style, right? You'd have a host come over, they would show you to your table, and again, this has to do with the whole COVID pandemic thing. You got to keep people certain amount of feet apart and all that. So in order to keep people from clumping up next to the limited number of fire pits, you now have to go and seat people at tables, and that worked very well for them, because then a woman came over and goes, "Could I get you anything from our kitchen? Here's a menu if you want to look at it." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is incredible. Could I get you anything?" And I was like, well, how long's the wait been? Like, how long between being seated and getting in? Have people, She goes, "It's not very long at all, you know." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't want to take the chance that I order something and it takes more than that 5 or 10 minutes. You know what I mean?" And she was like, "No, I totally understand. Can I get you a drink or anything?" I was like, "No, I'm good. Thank you, though." And, sure enough, 2 minutes after she walked away, our number got called to go up and go stand in the 3-minute line. And basically, the only time you spent standing there was uh, I guess, the ticket taker, if you will. Um, or I guess the person who would traditionally be in the role of a ticket taker just kind of explain the rules. Don't touch anything. Don't touch anyone. Blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah,
Given the
whatever,
rules
right?
spiel. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Our actors will stay 6 feet away from you, give them the same courtesy, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
right?
And I think
So,
that's where the pick a number type of system, especially if that's integrated in with the virtual queue, that's where that really shines, because there's a haunt close to us called Horror Hike, and they've used this system for the last several years, and we love it. You show up, and it's like you go through a little maze area first, and then, uh, or they might even give you a number before that, but yeah, it's after you get out of the maze, they give you the number, and you're welcome to sit by the campfire. You can go visit the concession stand, and you look at this number, and you look up on the screen, and you realize you're 8 numbers, behind. There's 8 numbers in front of you, so you can pretty well guess that you've got at least, maybe 20, 30 minutes between you and when you're going to get to go through, because you're watching the bus take you down to the start of the haunt, or you're watching the bus take other people down, and you're kind of getting a repetition. Okay, there's 2-3 minutes in between each of these groups. Okay, maybe I've got 15, 20 minutes left. I can definitely go to the concession stand and get a can of Pepsi and a hot dog and have no fear that I'm not going to get to eat it before I got to go. So I really like the idea of being able to see how much time you've got left. And like Nora was saying with Fear Fair, he gives you occasional updates. You got 40 minutes left, you got 20 minutes left, and I could even justify going on 5-minute intervals just to, if you have a way of updating folks on how much of a line wait, because maybe you say there's 40 minutes and 10 minutes later, oh, it's actually down to 20 minutes now. That'd be even better if you could get real granular with letting folks know, kind of like waiting in line at an amusement park. They've got a little sign above all the windows. This is how long your wait is. So if you're in the back of the line, and that's about, or if you're getting ready to get in line, that's about how long you can expect to wait.
Yeah, and on that note too, you mentioned at the amusement parks, Hershey, which our listeners will know I love Hershey. They have an app, and you can download this app on your phone, and it'll tell you all the wait times for all of the rides. For everything that's open, it shows you what's open, what's not, what the wait time is, or estimated wait time, I should say. And Disney, I think, does a similar thing. I think Universal does something similar now. Six Flags, I think, is moving to something like that. And that's something too that as technology becomes more accessible for more and more people, you might start to see, I think, some haunts having an app or something that you can access right on your phone, and it tells you, hey, the wait time for the house is 10 minutes. The wait time for the hayride is 20 minutes. Our secondary escape rooms are not open tonight.
Hey, Brian, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. We got a comment. Travis says he's not able to hear anything from you, so you might need to. I mean, you sound pretty good on my end, but apparently it's not coming through. He's saying he can see that you're talking, but there's no audio. I don't know if there's a problem in OBS. It's not letting your voice carry through or what. But just wanted to drop that in there. He sees your little green light around your profile, but he's not coming through.
Yeah.
Hi, Travis.
Yes, hello, Travis.
Yeah, you know why? You know why? Because your boy's an idiot.
That happened on, what was it, episode?
Travis, I do appreciate that. So I did change mics. You didn't hear any of this. It'll be on the actual audio recording though. So hey, the good news, right?
Like, yeah, we'll catch it in post production. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Thank you, Travis.
So
hey,
an idiot.
Are you able to hear him now, Travis? Comment. Let us know.
I appreciate you letting me know.
Yes, Travis says he can hear us, so we're good. Awesome.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So here's the reason why I didn't change the mic in OBS. I totally forgot.
Oh my
God!
God!
It'd be something I would totally forget about.
Such a rookie mistake.
I always forget something with the audio. So
I would have probably forgot it too. So I don't have much room to talk. But
yeah, so I want to reiterate that point I was making then, just for the sake of saying it again. As technology becomes more accessible, I think you're going to see haunts that are using apps much like Hershey or Disney or Universal that will show you how long the wait is and what's open, what's not, and
oh, absolutely, and
really you'll be able to upgrade your ticket right from the app.
Exactly.
You think, oh, that wait line, forget that. I want VIP, but then the wait line at the ticket booth is too long. Guess what? I'm going to do it right from my phone. I'm going to use Apple Pay from my phone, and I'm going to have it right there. And then you're going to scan that QR code on my phone, and it's going to be ducky.
And it doesn't even have to be that, as long as somebody is patrolling up and down through the lines and at least offering. You could have somebody line busting saying, hey, you've got such and such a wait. Do you want to continue waiting in line, or do you want to upgrade?
Out of all the years we've been to haunted houses, we've seen one do that.
Mm-hmm.
One.
Which one was that?
Remind me. It would be
Massacre.
Would be
Massacre was doing
at a really busy haunt. Think about how much money they can make in a night, because people get in line, they're like, oh man, I should have bought VIP, and then they turn around, they're like, well, there's no way I'm getting out of this line now.
Right. And that's something we were talking about earlier too in all of this line wait. A lot of haunts want to move to time ticketing because they want to eliminate that line wait. They can reduce their crowd to knowing I can only sell 100 tickets per hour or half hour or whatever it is they choose. And we were like, what about implementing the signs like amusement parks do? They know that from this spot in line to this spot in line, it generally takes the roller coasters this much time, and there's usually this many people standing in this area. So they'll put, if this is an hour wait, this is 2 hours, this is 2.5 hours, this is 3 hours. I
Right.
feel like as a customer, even if you have a standard traditional queue line and your line is 3 hours long as I am aware of that, and I have the option to bypass it by getting VIP, I don't think I'm going to be near as upset for waiting 3 hours as if you didn't tell me.
Right.
Right.
Like, I feel like you could just say there's a 3 hour wait or there's about at least a 2 hour wait. So you can either go over here and do this, or with those that are doing normal queue lines, you have to stand there. But at least it gives them an option, and they're not going to be as upset when they get into the show and went, damn it, I waited 3 hours to get in there. That's ridiculous, because then they chose to wait three
Yeah,
hours if you weren't.
you've empowered the customer to at least feel like they made the decision to go through what they're going through, and all the haunts really have to do is just educate, provide that information to the customer, allow them to make the informed decision to either go through that or not.
Well, and you can do that
So
positively
the
too
biggest
and say, we want you to have the best experience possible. We are very busy tonight, but in order to maintain as much spacing in between groups, your late wait is going to be longer. But that's, for you to get your full ticket price in the show. We don't want to rush you through here.
the biggest challenge that we used to have related to zone loading or like virtual queue, like you guys called it, was um we essentially had to change what we did during from week to week. So as weeks got busier and weekends got busier, our zones had to adapt because, let's say, we would start off the season and we would barely go through like three or four zones. Like it was a really, really like kind of like slow night. And then on our nights, like that's Halloween weekend or the weekend before Halloween, um, we would go through, they were done by the alphabet and we would run out of letters out of the alphabet. So we would have to start reusing letters or start going into numbers. And the zones themselves, we done it some years where we would change the number. So say earlier in the season, zones would be like 100 customers going through, whereas later in the season, that number represented or the zones would be like 500 customers going through. But where you have the ticketing and you're like, hey, you're in this line and it's this number of weight, um, we could do that to an extent, and we kind of did working at the front end. I used to be a queue line actor, and so we would have to talk a lot with like the ticket desk of essentially when we would need new zones to kind of like go through the haunt. And we had like our like little marquees that we kind of like would indicate, but um really everything was so contingent on how fast the ticket taker person, we called them barkers, um, how fast our barkers could crank in groups. So how fast can they go ahead and say the instructions, get the group to go through, and how fast that group could go through that first scene. If you have the ones where you have the people running right back out of the haunt or they go in and out of the haunt, like all of that's going to like mess up your timing. And I think that's where the kind of like erring on the side of caution is like you don't want to state a time even if it's like exaggerated. So say if you're like, okay, if you're standing at this point in line and from this point it's going to be a 30-minute wait, um if it's not 30 minutes, like you're gonna have to like pay hell. Like if it's anything over 30 minutes, like you're paying hell because you have something posted that says that if you're standing here at this point, it's going to be 30 minutes and hopefully it's less, when it goes through. But that was kind of our biggest challenge was it was just always so different between um that early part of the season and that late part of the season to actually come up with some type of actual being able to explain how long that people are going to be in line, in particularly of like the biggest thing for us was like communication between the ticket desk and security and the actors and the barker and like everybody had to be on the same page. as into being able to give like a proper estimate, but very few people had like access to all of those groups to see like, oh, this is how many people we actually have waiting at the ticket booth to get in. This is what group we're on, actually admitting back into like the haunt, and then these are the groups that are staged, air quote staged, in the midway waiting to go on. So say the ticket booth is on letter G, and then we're only admitting B up in the haunt. That means that you have C, D, E, and F chilling out in the midway somewhere. And so then you would have to get some type of very, very padded answer as into like, well, you got like an hour, you have 2 hours, you have whatever. It's gets really hard. Um, the less granular that you go with
It
it.
would definitely have to be a well-oiled machine to be able to
Or an
come up
overestimation.
exactly to be able to
Yeah.
even get close to quote what kind of line weight somebody can expect. And I think that's kind of where the
Right.
amusement parks can shine, is because they know exactly how long it takes that roller coaster to go through and how long on average it takes for the old customers to get off and the new ones to get boarded, and for that
Yeah.
person to hit the go button on the ride. They've got that down to an art. And so
But I also think that these things that we're all bringing up here are also why any of the actual time ticketing experiences that we've had that we discussed prior to this podcast, none of us were ever on, like, we never got to go into the haunt on time. It was always delayed. Like, we showed up here at 7 and we went into haunt at 8:30, even though our ticket said we would go in approximately 7, maybe show up a little early. So you want your customers to understand, hey, this isn't an exact number. It's an, it's estimated, but they're never going to understand it any way you give it to them, probably, because they probably call you every day asking if you sell tickets or what
That
time you're open. And
you know, it's funny because like people just pay so little attention to literally everything,
oh my
right? Like
gosh.
there's yeah, you're absolutely right. They're still going to be calling you up going like, "Do you sell tickets online?" Like, "Yes." How did you get our phone number, sir? I
Mm-hmm.
found it on Google.
Did you see the big
Okay.
orange
So
button
you're
right
halfway
above our
there.
phone number? Yeah. It says buy tickets now.
um
Yeah.
yeah, but like also I think the reason that, this whole like you buy a ticket I'll give you a great example, right? I went to Haunted Overload this past year, and when you bought a ticket there, it said there was a time on there, right? And it told you in the email when they sent you the ticket, it says the time on your ticket is the time that you are pulling into our parking lot. And I said, okay. So I had planned for that. And then I got there and there's this gigantic line. And I thought, well, geez, what was the point? Because I feel like the people who are supposed to be here an hour from now are standing in this line. And the people who were here 2 hours ago are supposed to be standing in this line.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, I don't know how, like, what was even the point then? And I think part of it too is to reduce the amount of traffic that's going in and out of that parking lot, because maybe the township that they're in was like, you can't have a mile of cars backed up because it's right off a 2-lane road. It's teeny tiny. It's a small little road that you're coming off of. So so I can kind of understand that too. But that's a very popular haunt. But it's, I mean, these people, they'll get that and they won't pay any bit of attention to anything. You know why? Because like, gotta go fast, gotta get there, and gotta get onto the next thing. And like, what are you in such a hurry for?
FOMO.
Mm-hmm.
That's it right there, right? It's people, they got to get to the haunt, and then they got to get through the haunt, and they race through the haunt, and then they don't enjoy it because they went through at a breakneck speed. And then they get out and they get in the car and they race home, and then for what? So you can have a beer at home on the couch watching the 11 o'clock news.
And Travis, yeah, and
Like,
Travis brings up a good point in the chat too. He says, "I think our market just doesn't understand what it is. Like you figure 30 years worth of haunting, however long a haunt or a community of haunts has been operating, and that's just part of what customers are used to. They're just used to showing up early and or as soon as they can and waiting in line, and that
right,
doesn't, you can do your time ticketing and your virtual queues, that kind of thing, all you want, but there's always going to be some percentage of people, because all of this is so new, there's always going to be some percentage that just still either shows up at the door and maybe there's a way for haunts to kind of account for that, like have a certain number of like overflow tickets set aside for those people. Or but I think like you're saying, Brian, is it comes down to either enforcement or having some place for those people. Okay, yeah, you're here. I'm not going to tell you to get in your car and pull away and come back in an hour. But here in the meantime, go hang out over here and do this and this and this, and then
Right.
or go to the ticket booth first, get your ticket, and that's got your actual line time on it, aka your virtual
Yeah.
queue. Get you signed up for that. Start getting your text alerts, whatever have you, and then go do this, and then yeah, get those people in there and let them go mingle in your midway, and slowly trickle them and filter them into your line, so that all of this is ultimately designed, I think, aside from minimizing your crowd control and all that stuff, it's also meant to minimize your wait in line, because customers, I'll raise my hand to this. I despise it, but I understand it's a thing. I absolutely hate waiting in lines. Anyway, I mean, I don't know how many times I've shown up and gotten in general admission line and been like 5 or 10 minutes goes by, and I'm like, all right, where's the VIP? Somebody take my money. I want
Yeah.
to go into VIP now. I do not like it. So I can,
Right.
and I've been in,
Well,
we've been in.
that's for lines that are completely boring.
Well, that's
though,
true.
too.
That's true. That's a good caveat.
Yeah.
If there's nothing going on, it's like, can somebody please shoot me now? But if there's something interesting going on, then yeah, I mean, a longer wait in line doesn't feel like a longer wait in line. But and we've been, I mean, we have waited in 3 hour lines before. Don't get me wrong, and I mean, my legs about killed me by the time we got into the haunt, and my mood was just shot, and we couldn't even enjoy the thing. But
Well, and I think there are ways that you can kind of resolve. You can kind of get the both, or I guess the best of both, or of all of these techniques and these methods. I was just thinking about this. So let's say you're going to sell your hunt and you're going to sell timed tickets, right? And so you're going to sell them on the half an hour. So you're going to sell 7, 7:30, 8, 8:30, so on and so forth till you close. And so let's say for each of those, you have, I don't know, 200 tickets available for each time slot. Maybe you're a huge haunt. You just have the space. You can do that, right? Okay, great. So now people show up. They've bought their tickets for those time slots. There's no way in hell you're letting 200 people jump in line at one time,
right,
right?
or maybe they are, but is that
Maybe you are.
right?
Maybe you have that throughput that you can do that. But generally speaking, I'm thinking it's probably just not going to
It's
work.
not going to be the case for
Uh,
most. Yeah,
on your tickets, you're going to put a number, right? Be it some number, some digit on that number, and that's going to correspond to what your time slot is, and where in the order of that time slot you picked up your ticket, right? So if you were the first one to pick up your ticket from the 9 o'clock slot, you get 901. If you were in the second, I don't know, 10 people or so to pick it up, you get 902. So on and so forth. You set them up with some code on the ticket, and then somewhere on your grounds, you have a very visible display that says ticket group. And when your number is on that board, you go get in
or
line.
it falls within the start and end numbers. You would
Correct.
say
No. It's not going to fall within the start and end numbers, right? Because you're going to have 20 people who have 901. You're going to have 20 people who have 902. You have 20 people with
oh.
903. So on and so
Well,
forth. You understand?
that's going to
So
be tougher to do than just having like a serialized ticket number that
so you have some sort of code that the haunt understands is a batch for this time slot. So if it comes up on the board 901 and I go over and my ticket says 903, they're going to tell me you need to go back and you need to wait until 903 comes up. I don't care what you do. You can hang around here. You can watch a movie. You can sit by the fire pit. You can go spit in the mud for all I care, but you're not getting in line.
Yeah, I don't think we
Yeah,
saw
so
any enforcing it this past
Right.
season.
And I think that might be an easier way. It helps communicate to more of your patrons that there is some sort of enforcement of when they should be getting in line, right? I don't care that you bought the 10 o'clock ticket and you showed up at 7:30 when we opened. If there's no enforcement whatsoever, those people are going to get in line and like, okay, great. Now you have one less person who's coming through at 10, but also you didn't plan on having that one extra person now at 7. So, maybe having some semblance of enforcement there. So
Tiffany,
that
what
way
were you
people
gonna
get
say?
there and they go, "Oh, my ticket says 9:01. Oh, what's it say on the board? It says 8:05. Okay, so I need to wait until 9:01 comes up. I realize I'm a little bit early." And I think, something like that where it becomes very, very visible how they want you getting in line, communicating with your customers without directly telling them, like, we need you to get in line at exactly this time, communicating with them in some way that they are either extraordinarily early or, hey, maybe they show up late, and then, you have some sort of plan for how to deal with that. But
yeah, I can see that being a thing, and that'd be very, very closely related to the pick a number system. You're just doing it in groups of numbers instead of by individually. But Tiffany,
right,
did you
right,
have something you were trying to say?
Yeah, so our biggest, again, going with challenges of like what we had is giving people tickets, they will lose them. So we had to like literally do wristbands and they were color coded.
Wristbands can work too.
So like blue, yeah, blue would be A, yada yada yada. Um so we literally had to like
Oh
tape it on
gosh.
in order for it to work. It wasn't something like where like series or ticket numbers would work. Trying to think, like there was a haunt that actually did have like ticket numbers, except the numbers kind of didn't mean anything in that um they were just given out ad hoc, and so they'd be selling like a number range like the day of, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it wouldn't work if you're just giving tickets
If
out
I
at
got,
random and you don't know what you're giving people. There would have to be some order to giving them out for sure. And that maybe if you got multiple ticket windows, that'd make it even harder because now you got to know which numbers, which windows is given out. And yeah, that could really be complicated quickly.
yeah, and the biggest one for particularly farm haunts or agritainment was Wi-Fi, internet technology, all of that stuff was hard. So if you had like an electronic ticket and you're away from the ticket booth, it was next to impossible to get anybody to get, guarantee that you'd be able to see some type of thing on them, unless if it was something that you gave them, like a wristband or whatever. Um, so like more of that was like kind of like again challenges that I seen that I never really seen like executed well. Um, the only thing that I could think of and what I was really really pushing last year with the whole push towards having like the drive-through haunts or something where again like it, you take that human factor out of control, right? So you know from start to beginning how long each one of your scenes are, and that car is going to be moving, or those group of cars are going to be moving scene, 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 scene. And so you knew exactly at what time, and that's about the only environment that we were able to successfully guarantee it. But I mean, even before pre-show is bringing up, I was like, yeah. There's things that still happen. There's things that delay all of that, and it isn't just delaying, that one person's experience. It's if something happens and your show's delayed by an hour or 30 minutes. Like even when we pre last year we were doing live shows, regular traditional hunts and stuff like that. Like uh, there was always something. We would do pre-check, and for some reason, one of our Jennies decided to like go haywire and not power our house, and so there would be these like weird untimed delays, and that always made everything sentimental. Like again, if we were doing time ticketing, and we're like, you're going to be in here at 6. It's like, no, please, nobody show
How
up
about
at
9?
6. Yeah, how about 9? 9 sounds good. It sounds
Right.
safe. We have 2 hours to prep, and if anything happens, it will happen within that 2 hours, and we'll be good and running by, 8 o'clock. And it's a weird like mentality to have, but even earlier, what uh was mentioned in the comments of you have to almost have that culture around it, and I think the culture around here, and particularly with when I was working at the haunt and patrons attending our haunt and stuff like that was all around. Um, you show up when you show up. They know that they're going to do zone loading, so they would show up, get their place in line, get their nice little wristband, and then they would kind of peace out in the midway because there wasn't really anything to do except the midway. Like there wasn't like restaurants nearby or whatever for them to disappear to, so they stayed on
And that's a
grounds.
goal anyway. But yeah,
And then yeah, once the zone was called, they would be able to go up and do that kind of thing. But that was the culture around it. And even when we flipped from having nothing to zone loading, like people were unhappy. People did not like it. And we're like, but you're not waiting in line at the house. This is better, right? Like, because you could go into Midway and not have to worry about it. And they're like, no, because they were just used to showing up at 6 o'clock and being able to go in instantaneously, or showing in right before close on like a slower weekend and being able to go through really quickly.
And I
But
think
yeah,
therein lies another problem, right? People want to complain so much that they hate standing in line, but then they have a panic attack when they have to not stand in line.
right? They're like, where's the line? Where's the line? Yeah.
What do I do? I'm gonna miss it.
Yeah. So that kind of brings up another method that we've seen used very well, and the haunt reported lots of good things from it, and that is a place. They're a couple hours from us. It's Wicked World, and they actually invested and bought the pager system like you see at a restaurant, and they gave everybody all those little vibrating light up pagers as soon as they bought a ticket, and they were free to roam around their midway, or if there was an especially long waiting line, of course they could leave. But then once their time came, they would page them, and that would send them up front. And the question we had for them was, okay, how many people stole your pagers? And they said actually nobody did. They only had one that was missing at the end of the season, or at the end of the night one night, and somebody had like dropped it next to their fence next to the parking lot. So like it didn't even leave grounds. It's just like somebody didn't know where to take it, so they just pitched it down on the way back out to the car or something. So that was a really good system for them. And like anytime you're at a restaurant, as soon as that buzzer goes off, hey, it's time to get my ass up to the hostess stand so we can get our dang table. So I think that could be another
And
really good system too. If you're not,
pretty they have a pretty big
oh
midway
yeah, they
too.
do.
Because I was curious at how far can these things reach out? Like, can you go sit in your car? But we've seen during COVID too, even at like Texas Roadhouse, we had to park, I think, 2 parking lots over to Texas Roadhouse one night, and they gave us one of those, and it went off just
They
fine.
sure did. I'm not sure what the range is on them, but it was good enough to do that. Um, but yeah, that's another system we thought was pretty nifty.
Yeah, I believe they said that it worked so well they were going to implement it in the future, so they were going to buy more and continue using it because they've kind of got food stands and DJ, and I think they do some karaoke, maybe a little bit up there on the DJ
They got a bunch of cue entertainers
stand,
run
and
around and
yeah.
slide on the pavement and
So,
scare folks and all that kind of thing.
yeah, I just want to interject real quick. You were saying you don't know what the range is. I just looked it up, and from a company called Maxi Aids, and they sell these. I think they might be one of the main suppliers of these. They say it has a range of up to about 100 feet.
Huh.
Interesting. It doesn't seem
Mm-hmm.
very far for this. Like I'm thinking like the size of this midway area that I'm thinking, but
Right, yeah.
Yeah, but like that's from the paging system, right? So from the system that you use to recall all of them. So I would imagine if you were in a central location and you're only going about 30 feet away from that central location, well, all of a sudden, now you have this really big range.
so yeah, the question for the week was time ticketing and virtual queues. Is it worth the time? I personally, I'm a big proponent. I really like all the time ticketing in the virtual queues because, as I ranted on earlier, I despise waiting in a line. So I am all for any way of shortening that kind of thing. I do tend to agree with, I think, most of you guys that most of what we've seen so far has been maybe not ideally implemented. So I think there's probably still a lot of room for improvement as far as this goes in the industry. And for the getting the haunts talking to one another and figuring out which system worked and how well and in what situations and all that kind of thing. But
Yeah. I mean, the haunt industry is full of creative professionals, and it strikes me as odd that we haven't come up with an elegant solution to this yet.
yeah, well, I think like I say, because it's so new, most folks just really started looking at it last year because of the whole COVID thing. But I do have faith that throughout the coming years, and I bet we'll probably even see some stuff at Transworld uh, for some haunts that are wanting to implement that a little bit more full time into future seasons. So I'm anxious to see what happens with it for sure.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I think my stance on it is it worth the time? I think rarely it's worth the time because you do have to follow up on making it work. You can't just sell timed slots and then expect people to follow that because I mean, have you met the general public?
It's like herding cats.
That is it exactly.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
definitely some more follow through and some more time
Yep.
involvement. So if you're already strapped and don't really have the staffing to absorb that type of addition into your company or into your haunt, then it may not be such a good idea. But like I say, I hope there's. I mean, it could even get as primitive as the pick a number system, which is pretty dang simple. So I mean, if you can't implement something
Yep.
to
And
help
and then
reduce the
and then
wait
you
line
got
or make
yeah,
it
right.
feel like you're waiting less than time, then I don't know what to tell you. But
Yeah, right. Take a number and then you got one guy with a bullhorn saying, "I need numbers 1 through 20 to get in line for the house."
And we didn't
And
think that would work very well until last year, and then we watched it. And that particular haunt had been running that system, I think they said, for like 15 years. And it looked flawless from being a customer and standing around for about an hour. Like every time they'd call a number, they'd ring a big, big, giant dinner bell. And you'd see a group get up and walk to the front, or they'd come from the movie area and go get in line. And it's like, wow. But those customers, I guess, are used to that because that haunt's been doing it for so long. However, no other haunts around them are doing it. So it's kind of interesting.
that haunt in particular even had like a whole movie viewing area set up. So like if you did have
yep.
a multiple hour wait in line, or even if you just wanted to go catch a little bit of this thing, you could go back in this area and watch a movie while you were waiting on your number to get called. And so
I think my take on it is if it's implemented correctly, which we have not seen really, um, if it can save you staffing and line issues and overflow issues, implement it. Cool. Um, I prefer the virtual queue and the number system myself, just because I like to wander around and not feel like I'm going to lose my place in line. But there's a lot of places that can't do that either. So another thing I feel like as a haunt owner, which I'm not, but I would feel like if I have customers coming to my facility, I want to keep them there for a while, right? I would like for them to stick around, have fun, spend money. If I sell them a 7 o'clock time slot, they show up at 7, go through the haunt, they're more than likely to leave at that point without doing everything else I have on grounds, right?
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I
mean
feel like.
that's it right there. It's and that's I think that is why you're starting to see more and more haunts come up with the add-on escape rooms. Right? People had a great time. They may not have bought the tickets right away, but they had a great time in the main attraction. And then they come out and they're like, "Wow, that was really good. I want to see more." And then they're like, "Oh, what's this? An escape room? Well, let's go buy a ticket for that. It's only $5."
Right.
And then they come out of that and they're like, "Yeah, we did it. We escaped." And then they're like, "Well, now I'm hungry." Well, more and more haunts are having on-site food vendors now. And then they think, well, geez, it's a little chillier than I thought it was. It's now that's getting later. Well, hey, now you can go buy that haunt brand merch.
upsells.
Speaking of merch, I think perhaps we should start plugging for some merch around here. Seems like the perfect platform for it.
And we do have Scare Factor merch. We've got a Spreadshirt store, which you can see on the homepage of thescarefactor.com. Scroll down to the bottom. It's not a hugely visible link, but it is on there. And if you have any particular Scream team that is your favorite, or if you just like Scare Factor in general, we got all kinds of shirts and tank tops and all kinds of cool stuff on there that you can.
Masks, mugs.
Mm-hmm.
Tiffany, what's your take on this topic?
So I believe like time ticketing. shared that article from Pickle earlier, and that has been a platform, uh, particularly around the pandemic, but even pre-pandemic, of being able to know how many people are in your haunt, what's your throughput going to be for the night, when people are showing up. And there's a lot of benefits to time ticketing, but again, everything that we brought up, there has to be like a culture around it. There has to be, an actual setup where your haunt is operating very mechanically. Like your patrons are going to be in line for this amount of time, and they're going to take this amount of time to go through the haunt, and then they're going to have this amount of time to go through the midway. And it's possible. I mean, we've seen it in restaurants. We see it. That's how escape rooms are. You're locked in a room for an hour. There's different like setups that it really really works well. And I think it's kind of hard just to like, particularly with like the pandemic, like everything was such a scramble of like, how can we keep open? How can we keep everything sanitized? How do we enforce all of this distancing and plexiglass? And like, there was this huge scramble. So I don't think it's necessarily a really good kind of like use case as to what time ticketing could do. But whereas pulling from examples of theme parks or even haunts that have been doing like zone loading or um, others that have executed time ticketing, I think particularly looking and focusing on them and seeing what worked well with them and what worked particularly in their kind of learning from them, and the more that could be shared about that. And again, like you guys were talking about, essentially haunts coming together and like figuring out like this is a platform that works, and having more of those use cases would help build up that esteem. But until then, it's going to be so new and so novel, and adding technology into haunts, even haunts that have some technology in it, is a very like scary idea.
Right? People don't like change. And that's a lot of
They
change.
don't, and it's really hard to propose, right? So if you're a haunt owner and you're trying to be like, oh well, we never did this thing before, so how is it going to work at our place? It's like you're sinking money into it, and it's hard. It's a hard sell, and it's a weird leap of faith that kind of has to happen. And I mean, the pandemic did one part of it of just kind of forcing everybody's arm to have to think that way, but what it's going to look like going forward, or rather, it's going to be a big thing going forward. It just matters how well, I guess, like hunts that picked up over the last year, like whether or not they're going to keep their investment and build and continue on for years to come. Like, that's about the only way that it would work. But yeah, I mean, I I'm for it, like as a patron and customer for like a lot of things. It's really nice to think going to escape rooms, because I know I could schedule an escape room and I could schedule my whole night based off of when my escape room time is, right? Um, and I don't have to worry about like haunts, and particularly like when I went to haunts when I was younger, like I know that I'm blowing 4 hours at a haunt when I was younger, because I wasn't necessarily on a mission to hit as many haunts as possible. I wanted to make a night of it. I was going to make a night of it. But I didn't necessarily know when I was going to go to like the haunt in that 4 hour time window. Unless if I was already working with like friends or whatever. But yeah, it would be really nice to be able to plan on the same level of being a customer to being like, okay, I'm going to go to the haunt. We're going to be there at 8. We're going to get out a little early, and we'll have a late dinner at this place that's near the haunt.
Oh
Like, it'd be
yeah,
really
it would.
nice to do that.
Yeah, it's wonderful going into, like you said, an escape room. If you show up, you know your time slot is 8 o'clock. They tell you to be there at 7:45. You show up at 7:50 even sometimes. You know the escape room's going to have their crap together. You're going to go in and sign your waiver, and they're going to take you back to the room. You're going to watch your little show if they have one, as far as breaking you into the room, and then you're going to have no more than an hour maybe 10 minutes tops after you take the picture afterwards and buy a couple shirts, and then you're going to be out of there at by 9:15 at the latest, and you can plan your evening based on that. And hunts are not quite there yet. I agree with you because they just not quite that systematized. Some of them are. Some of them. I mean, you get into if you get into Netherworld probably and watch some of their line flows, or even like Statesville and Hell's Gate, some of those guys. I mean, if you watch them long enough, you can tell they've got a pretty good rhythm down of moving people through, their queue areas and the starts of their haunts.
Well, and they're more so conga line
Yeah,
haunts.
yeah.
For those that aren't familiar.
And those are the ones that, I mean, they're conga line for a reason. It's because they've got massive quantities of people trying to go through, and it's almost a perfect use case for like the time ticketing, wherein you're trying to minimize that wait in line. Hey guys, don't show up until this time of the night because I know the first 2 slots ahead of you are going to be built up for this amount of time. We can work through them in this amount of time. So, yeah, you can reverse engineer that and help make for a better customer experience.
That's true. And all it takes is haunt owners just getting on board with a little bit of change and stepping outside of their box.
Mm-hmm. The box.
Yeah, that box.
You'll probably hear us talk
Yeah,
about
that's
that
right.
box
They're all in the
quite a
box.
bit on this show.
Oh, yeah. Maybe that's what we ought to call the show, the box.
Breaking out of the box. Yeah.
Breaking out of the box. But we are coming right up on that 1 hour mark.
Yes, we are.
Were there any final thoughts?
What are we talking about next week?
Yeah, what are we talking about this week? Time ticketing. Let us know in the
What are we
comments
talking
if you
about
think time ticketing is worth the time or not. We want to know what you think. But yeah, if you also have any comments, thoughts for next week's topic, we are all ears.
We've been thinking about talking about pet peeves, and we'll try not to name drop anything or anyone specifically. Brian's over there groaning because this could take forever, but I was thinking if we do it by category, then maybe it would be better.
Pet peeves by category. Break it down like cast 1 week and costuming another week, or
I think I may have to sit
That's
a
a
few
lot
of
of
these
pet
out because
peeves.
I think it's very well known that I drink during these. And,
Brian, you just can't say anybody's name. It's not.
yeah,
just don't
that's
do it.
why I might have to sit
How
a
I
few
know.
of them out. Just saying. Just saying. Look, I already drink when we do the podcast, so
He'll be like, it starts with
I
an
don't
H.
need to get really fired up.
He'll
too.
say this one place. I won't say what it is, but it starts with an H and it ends with a haunted house. I can see it now. But all right, let's wrap this thing up, guys. Let's see. Wanted to thank everybody very, very much for taking the time to listen to us this week. Let us know if Saturdays or Sundays work out better for you. I guess from now moving forward, until we hear something different, I think I kind of like the Sundays myself, but I guess we'll keep on that discussion later. Let us know what you guys think as our listeners. Thank you very much for joining us. You can find us on our website at thescarefactor.com, as well as on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, the whole 9 yards at The Scare Factor. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, leave us a review. Every little thing that you can do to help the algorithms know that we're doing a good job brings much joy to us, and that helps us bring more entertainment and value to you and other people that would like it too. So, all right, that's all for today, guys. Remember, stay scary and happy haunting. And ring the bell.
And ring that bell.
All right, we're out.